What's up, everybody? It's Motley GM. I'm here with you again today, giving you my second video in a 5-video series of games I really hope you'll give a try other than the world's most popular tabletop game. Now, if you're like me and you're leaving the name brand behind, but you still love tabletop gaming and you want to get into the OSR, the independent scene, whatever, hopefully this list will have at least one game you want to try. My whole goal here is to hopefully give the people that want just one game that they want to play. One game, one and done. They don't want to necessarily jump from game to game. They don't want to necessarily try a lot of games. They like playing fantasy games, but they don't want to play Dungeons and Dragons anymore. This list is for you. This first series of 5 is going to focus more on independent games. I will also have a series on companies, so stay tuned for that because there might be some games there that aren't on this list because I felt they fit better on that one. So please stay tuned. To clarify about this list, they will all be independent games. Also, they will share the fact that they are D20 systems and the fact that they use classic fantasy as their base, as in that classic medieval inspired fantasy. That could be grimdark, that could be sword and sorcery, that could be high fantasy or anything in between. But that's the basis to their rules. That's what they have in common. We're going to cover Apotheosis today. This is a game that I feel is criminally underrated, and I've had the pleasure to run and play in, and I feel is a wonderful system that is just overlooked in a sea of choice, not because it's not good, but just because the competition out there is fierce. Let's face it. I think this one just slid under the radar, and I'm hoping to get it to ting on somebody's radar out there, and they'll look into it a little bit more because I think this is a great game that really deserves to be a little bit higher in the ranking of newer games being played. Honestly, I really would love to see more people take a look at this and get into it, but I'll gush a little bit. This is one of my favorites. In case you haven't guessed by now, these top 5 are not only games I feel are objectively good, but they're my favorite ones that I've played and or run. And I want to throw them out there because I want people to know about them a little bit better. Apotheosis is a game that I feel is familiar enough that you don't feel you're learning an entirely new system or something completely new, but also gives new elements that make you feel like you're playing a different game, even though the themes are the same. And when we go to the PDF and I show you some of the things that I think stand out, I feel you'll understand that a little better. But what is Apotheosis? It is a D20 classless system released in 2021 by writer-creator Ian Tassin. Big shout out to you, Ian, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name. But I've had the pleasure to speak with Ian a few times on Discord, just some short conversations, but he seems like a really down-to-earth, good guy that really loves tabletop games and really stands behind the game that he created, and I love that. And I think there's some great ideas in here that I want to showcase, and we'll go over that in just a little bit. It does have a unique combat and progression system, so there's not so much levels because it's a classless system, but there is ways to progress. And the way it's written in this game, I think, is really well done. But there's also options as well, instead of having to stick to just one thing, which the Motley Jam is always about. We're always going to be about that here at the channel. I'm not going to do a review, as I've stated before. I don't really do reviews. There's great channels that do reviews. So if you're one of those channels that do reviews, please review this game from cover to cover. That would be awesome. I'm here to showcase and let you guys know about it because I think this needs to be seen a little bit more. But it does have a unique combat and progression system, and I think those things add an excitement and meaning to the game that you don't necessarily feel in some of the more popular game-inspired games. I guess that's a good way to put it. It is a 5-attribute system, so it has all the basic ones. It just takes out wisdom. Wisdom and intelligence are combined here. However, 5 attributes, and those attributes are how you build your character out. I'll show you that when we go to the PDF here, but I think that's kind of important because you're not only rolling everything based on these attributes, but it's also how your character will end up being built on the way you choose to play. And I think that's really awesome about this. There are species in this book, both classic and new. And I think the new stuff is really worth looking at. So we're going to showcase that a little bit. And this does have a sci-fi edition. So if you like the classic gaming, but you also enjoy playing other genres, the sci-fi edition of these rules, or of this rule set, combined with the core rules, gives you options to pick and choose, almost like a menu, to create whatever genre you want to play in. And I love that about this system. So if you're looking for that one and done system that allows you to do everything and you don't want to worry about other systems, Apotheosis really has you covered. It also includes a couple of expansions already that come from the community, and I think that's great. I think Apotheosis has a small but awesome and creative community. Big shout out to the Discord guys out there. The writers of the game and of these expansions are all active in the Discord, which is another wonderful thing about this game. I will gush a little bit about it. I'm not going to pretend like I won't, because I really find this game to have some great ideas that if more people ran it and understood how wonderful it is to run, how it does allow for a lot of creativity, both in the way it's written and in the way it allows you to write your own things. I can gush and gush and gush for days, but let's go to the PDF so I can show you some of the stuff that I really like, and then we'll come back here and I'll give you my closing thoughts. Alrighty, everybody. Here we are at the PDF, and I'm using the PDF, guys, mostly for your benefit. I just feel you could see it better than me flipping through the pages. Also lets me show off their PDFs a little bit too, because they also look nice, as you can see. So let's go over some of the things that I really find interesting about this game. Starting off with the species here. Now, as you can see here, we have your classic dwarf, your elf, the halfling, your human, and your orc. Now, you may argue whether orc is classic or not, but essentially classic species that you see in most fantasy games. And I think that's pretty awesome. They did a great job. The artwork looks nice. No complaints there. But the stuff I really want to showcase here is some of their original species, starting with the Antherians, or your humanoid animals, or animal humanoids, or furries, or whatever you want to call them. They do a really good job of giving you multiple options for the types of Antherian you can be. And I think that's pretty awesome. Right off the bat, not only is the artwork really cool, but they give you a good array of different types of species here. And I think that's really awesome, not only because it just automatically gives you multiple choices, but I feel there's enough reference here that you can mix and match and create something that you'd like that may not already be here. For the Motley GM, that's always a bonus. When you feel the flexibility and ability to create in a system, I think that does more than expansions and modules and anything else can do, because a good GM that enjoys the creativity that a game allows you doesn't necessarily need those other things so much. I'm not saying to not patronize those things, of course. However, if you're in a situation where all you can afford or all you have is the core rules, it gives you enough there to be flexible and creative. And I always love that. And this is just one great example of that. The bijou here, this is one I like a lot. Fey-like creatures, they have transparent skin and they can be just randomly born to a virgin birth in wherever by whoever. I think that's really cool. There's a lot more to it here. Feel free to read as I showcase a little bit here. But they're innately magic with clear skin. That's pretty awesome. What does that mean in your world? I find this to be a really creative species here, and I really enjoy that. This is something different, something that you don't necessarily get to play in other games. So is the Demore here. Basically, these are somewhat undeadish, like half undead is a good way to put it. And I've had a couple people play these species, and they have some very, very useful skills. I think that's pretty cool. Hellborn if you're into tieflings, but I'm not. We're just going to skip over that one. Neurocyte, this is the one I want to show you. Insects that infest and operate a body, they need a host body, and that's just awesome. I think that's great. I think that's great that you can play an intelligent insect that's controlling the body of something. Why? Why are they here? What are they doing? I don't even know. I don't think it even matters. I think that's great. That's just super cool. Trichosa, I think is how you pronounce it. I probably got that wrong. Either way, just again, just something different, something you don't see in other places. And these are things that I love. I love different things. There's nothing wrong with the classics, and that's provided here. But you get these interesting, original ideas, or at least ideas you don't see very often. And I love that. I think that's great. So kudos to them for that. Take a look at some of these alternatives. It just gives your world a different feel and flavor, and that's one of the things a Motley GM is always happy to see. Just different flavors, different ideas that can still fit in and make your stories a little more interesting. Let's talk about the character progression. Now, I'm going to do my best to simplify this here, or at least explain it. By all means, I will leave this up so you can at least read it for yourself while I try to explain it, or pause here, however you want to do it. But here's how I understand the progression system works, and I like it. You have 5 attributes. You roll using these attributes just like any: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, and charisma. Wisdom is taken out, intelligence and wisdom are under the same thing in this game. So you're not only rolling on these to try to make something happen in the game, but every time you succeed in a roll for one of these attributes, that is equal to 10 plus whatever your score is. So say you have a strength of 3, if you roll a 13 or more, you keep track of that. These are your progression points. Once you have enough progression points that's equal to 10 times your attribute. So in the example I gave, if you have a strength of 3, when you have 30 of these progression points, you can now add 1 to your strength attribute. And since that's above 3, you can also choose from the pools of attributes, abilities that you can choose. And I think that's pretty awesome. Honestly, I just think that's great the way that works. Now, this is an intentionally slow way of advancing. So if you're noticing that, or if you're thinking that, like, Motley GM, this is so slow, it's meant to be that way because this is meant to fit a long term campaign. Now, alternatively, you can just give attribute points when you feel you wish to as a GM. You could manipulate the way that this progression works by making the numbers less in places or more in others to make it a faster progression. But I really like the way this is done. So the more you use an attribute, let's say you're a strong guy and you want to get stronger, every time you use strength successfully, you have a chance of increasing that ability, or at least gaining the experience that will allow you to increase that. And I think that's a really cool way of doing a classless system like this. If you are on my channel here, you know the Motley GM way is you can always manipulate, change numbers, change anything you want as a GM. And this is easily manipulated to make that progression go quicker. Or again, as a GM, you could just give points as you see fit. And that's just something I think is wonderful. I gave you a very simplified idea of what the character progression is. Refer to the book here, of course, if you want to get a little more in depth. But I think that's a great progression system. I think it's cool. And it really does take into account what you're rolling for, what abilities are you using so that those skills actually increase because you're using them. And I think that's awesome. That's a really cool way of looking at it. You're not just waiting to level up and gain a bunch of stuff because you leveled up. You're literally contributing to building your character through the way that they play by what attributes they choose to use more often. Awesome. Awesome. I can't compliment them enough on what a good idea that is. I really enjoy that idea. So the next thing I want to talk about that I think is really cool is the way that combat works. There are 2 parts to the combat system that I really want to showcase here that I like a lot. Now, I feel that this system is good for both GM and player to really be more engaged in combat and make combat more exciting. I hope I'm going to do a good job explaining this because it really is probably more simple than I'm going to make it sound here, but I really want to give you the idea. So instead of hit points, you have energy points, EP. Now, what this basically is a pool of points that allows you as the character to dodge or otherwise negate oncoming
damage. All right, so instead of just taking hit points, you have a certain pool of energy points. You also have a defense, which is basically AC. How does this work? Defense is essentially for the easy, mundane ways that you may avoid getting hit. It bounces off your shield, glances off your armor. You're able to easily parry without much movement or thought involved at all. So your easy stuff is taken care of by defense. Where EP comes into play is how do you avoid the damage that broke through your defenses? Let's say you have an EP of 10, you get attacked, and the damage for that attack is 4. You're going to use 4 of your EP points to avoid that. And then you, as the player, will describe how. So the GM not only has to be describing how the enemy is attacking, the player has to describe how they're avoiding that attack. And I really do think that makes combat more engaging because you really do have to think about what you're doing as a GM and how that creature or enemy will attack. And conversely, will have the players on their toes thinking about how am I going to sidestep this, parry that, get past this defense. It really makes combat more engaging, in my opinion. I like this system much better. So that's the first part of this combat system. The second part I want to talk about is the wound and death save system. Now, energy points are how we get away from being damaged. But what happens when we're damaged? Well, when we're damaged, you're going to get wounded. Now, with every wound that you get, you have to roll death save. Death saves in this game aren't after you're dying to see if you make it or not. They're basically to say, is your wound grievous enough that it's starting to do really bad things to you, either the end of you or severely wounding you? And the death saves determine that. And I think that's great. With the wound system, the wounds are the measure of damage, basically. Everybody has a certain amount of set wounds that they can take once you've taken all of those wounds. Or if your death saves deem the wound to be bad enough that it takes away those wound points right away, then that is where your character is no longer. And I think that's really cool because it allows one wound, one strike to do serious damage. And I think that's very, very believable in a combat scenario. How one good strike might do enough damage to actually just take that character out, whether NPC or player character. This can be very brutal depending on the characters and their different abilities, of course. Some may even say too brutal. For me, I like the fact that they include a system that makes death very real, very scary, and very present all the time. If you've been listening to the channel at all, you know that's something I really enjoy in a game because that's what makes a game really exciting. Even with superheroes, you should have a way to exploit their weaknesses. Otherwise, the real threat of death, or at the very least losing a great deal of power and or wealth, should always be on the table. But I think death is definitely something that should be on the table, and this system does a really good job. I may or may not be describing this the best, but I think if you simply look at it as defense and EP are ways that you negate damage, wounds and death saves are how much damage you're taking. Look to the book to get a much better description. I'm not reading like a word for word thing here. I'm just giving you my reflections on it. So, Ian, if I'm doing this poorly, I'm sorry, buddy. But I really like this system. I think if you're a person that understands combat or enjoys getting into that more, if you're a person that wants your fights to seem more like movie fight scenes, this is a really good way to do it because the description is built into the idea. And the idea that one super damaging wound can take you out is a wonderful idea that I think should be present in just about every game, which is why I run games the way I do. Kudos to you guys on this one as well. I very much like that and can't get enough of it. One of the other things I love about Apotheosis is that it does a roll to cast system. On top of that, it uses a point system for their spells that matches the level. This is exactly how I do things in my game as far as casting spells and how that can go wrong. So a cast a spell with a DC with the possibility of a penalty with critical failure, I think it always just makes magic more fun and allows everybody to realize that magic is a volatile force that can be mishandled. And I don't feel that any world where magic is possible, that the mishandling of magic isn't also possible. Even if there's many learned people with many magic schools, there's always those novices, there's always those reckless people who may just not do it right or may overdo it and cause damage. And I love a roll to cast system that gives you that possibility of failure. Also, the possibility of that failure being somewhat catastrophic. I think that fits the idea of magic in a fantasy world so well that taking that out almost takes you out of the idea of fantasy and puts you into a different type of game from the way I see it. And again, I'm just doing the Motley GM way. Maybe you see it differently. If you do, share below. Let me know what you think about that. I love hearing new thoughts. But I do love that. Yes, please, on a roll to cast system with an easy point system to know how many spells can be cast. I love it. I just think that's great. As I was stating before about Apotheosis in general, and I'm just going to scroll here a little bit while I'm talking about it, just so you can see some of the cool artwork. But I think this game is written in a way that allows you as a GM and even a player to be creative and to add to the game any way you want. Now, the core and the things they have as far as the ability pools are already awesome and well thought out and well written, but it's also done in a way that allows for you to write your own to add in, maybe to fit the genre that you're playing, maybe to fit a specific story that you're trying to tell. But it gives you that flexibility, but also already gives you enough that most of what you want is probably already there if you just look for it. And that's just something I really love about this game. It allows for creativity and adding to the game. It's definitely a game that says take what you want and use it and throw away the rest. And that is by definition the Motley GM way in many regards. So this game just checks all the boxes for the channel here. This would be considered a rules medium game in my opinion, and I think they do this wonderfully. I would almost say this is the perfect example of what my channel considers a rules medium game. It's also easy to simplify, and I think that's really great. I could gush about this for a very long time. So let's get to my final thoughts on this wonderful game, Apotheosis. I'll join you back over at the table.
All right, everybody. I hope by showing you the things that I really like about this game on the PDF, I gave you a really good idea of what makes this game unique. There's a lot that makes this game familiar as well, but the things that I listed here are certainly not the only things that makes this game unique. I can't recommend you go check it out enough, especially if you're a person that's looking for a one and done system. This does it just packaged the way it is. For this book, the sci-fi book, and the expansions, I believe all together cost less than $100. That's for me getting all the hardcover editions when I could, all those things. You don't have to spend that much. The PDFs are of course available and much cheaper than the books themselves. But even with that put in, less than $100 to have enough material to last you for the rest of your life and gives you the flexibility to play almost any genre you want, I think is well worth the purchase price. Not only that, the system is well written and written in a way that allows you to add or subtract from it without it hurting the mechanics whatsoever. The combat system is dynamic and I feel more fun for both the GM and the players. They use a magic point system that's almost exactly like I do at my table at home when I use magic points. This hits so many of the bases that the Motley GM channel stands for. I really feel if you're more into telling a story and building a character instead of necessarily fitting into a class, and you want to be able to do that with multiple genres, you can't really do better than Apotheosis from my experience so far. I'll get arguments about that, and by all means, respectfully do so in the comments below. But this is one of the best systems I've come across and actually played and run that I feel does that the best. And it's very, very highly underrated. I don't care what any critic may or may not say. I stand by this one here, guys. Apotheosis is a wonderful system, especially if you want a one and done. It's worth checking out. Keep in mind, joining the Discord gives you access to the writers of the games. The core rule system, and the expansions. These are all people that are available to you on the Discord. And I think that's great. There's a great community of really cool and creative people over there. They're a community that really embodies the Motley GM spirit. So if any of you guys are watching this, a big shout out to you guys. This is a great game. Keep doing what you're doing. I can't support you guys enough. Ian, especially, you're the creator of this game. Thank you so much for doing so. I really hope that we can get the word out of how awesome this game is and more people will pick it up. I know there's a lot of hype out there for other games, and I totally understand that. That's going to happen. But this one should definitely be lifted up with the other boats that are rising, if you understand where I'm coming from there. I'm going to gush more and more if I don't shut up now, guys. So I really appreciate you sticking with me for this. Check out Apotheosis. It's a great system. I hope that more people will do so. I can't recommend it enough, especially if you really want to leave the class system behind and want to have more customization into how you play and also have the way you play affect how your character grows. Apotheosis does this so well. It's so wonderful. But all in all, with this entire series I'm doing here, I'm hoping that you're going to try something new. I want you to get something that's going to inspire you to be creative and to have a lot of fun with you and your group. So GMs, I want you to have fun too. I think Apotheosis does a great job doing this. So explore some new games, check out some exciting stuff, and do it all in the pursuit of playing for fun first. Thanks for watching, everybody.